Okay, an interesting one that I just finished here on the channel called Sextinction by Dr. Debra. It's the future of sex, or the decline of sex and the future of intimacy. And basically what the book says that it's about is I'll kind of read from the little insert here. There's a strange paradox in today's developed world. Society's never been more sexualized, but people across all age groups and demographics are having less sex than ever before. And nobody seems to know why or what to do about it. So that right there is a pretty good hook to a book, right? Like I'm interested. It's what hooked me into this book. I saw her I did not know about her. I know she's written other books, but I saw her on I think Chris Williamson's podcast. And it got me interested. And then when I saw that, I was like, oh, cool, that's an interesting topic. It's also one that I would say it kind of aligns data with anecdotal experience that I have heard of from friends and family who know people that are younger today. So this book is definitely focused more towards later millennials and back. So what I mean, I guess you'd say and forward, right? So like Gen Z, and then, basically kids born 1990-ish and on. So me being born in the 80s, it's kind of my generation, but not so much. I guess you could say we kind of missed out on this. But anyways, the whole kind of premise of this book is that there's a lot of things that are happening in society that are driving people to have less sex. And she goes through each of those in this book into kind of different chapters. And it starts off, I would say, pretty powerful, because it's something that I think about both having a young son, being a guy, and again, just hearing about these things nowadays is that, I read another book and reviewed it on the channel here called The Notes on Being a Man, and Scott Galloway talked a little bit about this, but particularly in the United States, we have politicized things like men in relationships and the patriarchy. And we've politicized it to the point where men, younger men in particular, no longer really know how to be masculine. We've kind of demasculated them in a lot of ways and made it almost cooler to be feminine. And this is something that happens in America all the time, is we slide the pendulum. We take something that's a good idea, like supporting women more, and we swing it all the way to the other side and basically destroy the confidence of young men to even, to pursue things like women and dating. And she talks about that to kind of open this book. And I think that's the most powerful part of this book is that what's happened to young men and why they are, for the political things. Obviously, she goes into things like pornography, sex bots, just essentially that we can get things that we used to we have access to things from a sexual standpoint that we did not have access to 50, 60 years ago. And so that's obviously part of it. But yeah, I thought that part of it was powerful because it's something that I've thought about myself. Like I said, having a young son is like, what have we done to boys these days? It's just, there's a lot going on in this world with that pendulum that swung. She talks about it in this book, how, women nowadays, they have a lot more control, right, with things like birth control. And so what you're seeing is that women are working more for a number of reasons, not just that, but women are becoming more and more the breadwinners. You also see women are becoming in more higher like power positions in corporate America. You combine that with the fact that women, and she talks about this in the book, and Scott Galloway talks about this a lot too in his book, about how women mature so much faster than men at a young age. And it's almost like Scott Galloway talks about this, is how women just essentially lap men in maturity when you get into like high school years. And I can identify with that as well. So you got this sort of problem where at a young age, women are already in this position where they almost have to date up. Now that women no longer really need a man for financial support, and they have control over their, potentially getting pregnant, there have been unintended consequences of that, like the politicization of masculinity. And so that part I thought was great in this book. But, she talks about some evolutionary stuff that I thought was pretty cool. It's just stuff that I didn't think about, right? And I'll read to you one thing I had wrote here. So, as you already know, sex is more costly to women due to the prospect of pregnancy, childbirth, and associated responsibilities like breastfeeding and child rearing. As a result, women are much more discriminating about their mates, preferring men who can protect and provide them for them and their future progeny. It's just there's the evolutionary standpoint that you don't think about a lot with men and women and childbirth, and how women, from an evolutionary standpoint, had to rely on usually just one person, one partner. Whereas men, from an evolutionary standpoint, were looking to just kind of put their seed in wherever they could. And again, it's something that it's kind of this unintended consequence that's happened today, is that now women sort of have more control of that. And it's just like these things, along with the other topics in this book, have led to people having less sex. And the issues with that are numerous. So it's affected people getting into relationships. I know a lot of younger people in the 30-ish age range where dating is a nightmare to them, especially young men. They don't know how to do it. They're not used to rejection. They're afraid of rejection. They've never gone through it before. You add in all these other factors like social media and how we never have to engage people except on our cell phones. It's just this like perfect storm of this sextinction. And so from that standpoint, I thought it was an interesting topic. She loses me at times in this book. She goes into, there's a couple things that I had issues with. It's a very academic book. And I think when you're writing about a topic like this, you have to mix some stories and anecdotal with the data more. Like, as an example, I don't think she's married. She says she's single, doesn't have kids. It's interesting to have so many strong opinions on marriage and kids when you haven't gone through that. And I don't know, not saying you're not allowed to do that, but it would be a lot more powerful as a book, as a piece of writing, if she could mix in her own stories, right? Her own experiences more, even funny stories. That's how you engage readers more, especially with topics like this. And so I thought that's just, I don't know, it's a miss. And she has some strong opinions on things that, in my opinion, she just hasn't really been a part of. I think there's a lot to learn when you're married and you have to live with someone and you have kids with them. You learn a lot more about yourself and your process and the challenges that she's just never been through. And so that part, I don't know. I don't know how she could, quote unquote, fix that, but I just think it's in this type of a book, you need some more of that. The other thing is it gets, like a lot of books do this where it gets off the topic. And so like she has this whole chapter about, I think it's called Life in Plastic. And, it's about how they're sex dolls. It's kind of coming down the pike, right? Like there's more and more sex dolls, people like that have AI in them and all this stuff. And it gets to this whole part about pedophiles, right? How there's this group of people in the United States that she's researched through, I think, previous books, and how they can get sex dolls of children and how horrible that is. And obviously, I totally agree with that. I'm assuming everyone who's watching this does. But what does that really have to do with the whole sextinction? Like, I don't think that has anything to do with why young men and women are having less sex. It's a reach, if anything. I just think she really should have stayed on that topic, kind of like Scott Galloway did in his book, because I think that's interesting. I think that's important. I just saw something today that said that fertility in the United States continues to go down. I think it's gone down every year since 2017. We're having less and less kids. People are getting married less and less. The marriages that do happen result in more divorces. All of that means something for the future of our species, future of America. And we're kind of like barreling towards this issue, but we don't talk about it. In some ways, it's kind of like, think of it like climate change, right? Remember climate change, and to some people, this is still a super important topic, but at the very least, climate change was something we talked about. in politics. I mean, people voted on it. There's still a lot of policies that are around it. I live in Washington State. There's green policies all over the place. We don't talk about this because it's kind of a weird topic. Well, people are having less sex and I don't know. It's just, it should be talked about more. What are the ramifications of that? I think it's fairly obvious, but it's something we should be talking about and trying to solve. And the problem, in my opinion, is that it's so systemic. Like, it's a cultural issue because of some of the things that we've done to young men, coupled with the fact that everybody's just on their phones all day long, not doing in-person meetups, not asking women out. You know, it sounds weird to talk about, like, but chasing after sex, that's not the worst thing in the world if you're doing it the right way. And what I mean by that is not forcing yourself on someone, but that's a part of life that we should all go through. It's a part of your journey. It's so absent from today's youth, and that's a problem that we should be talking a lot more about. So anyway, that's the review that I had for Sextinction. I like the topic. A decent book, especially in the beginning. A lot of books have this problem where, like, kind of the first 50, 75 pages hit hard and then it kind of tails off. That's what I think this book does for me. Just had some misses. But in that sense, if you're interested in the topic, could be a good read, and maybe you just read the first portion of it. So that's Sextinction by Dr. Debra. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching.